chance. The Talmud tells us that actually came from a Takanas Moshe, from Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu established that the Jews should read on each holiday a portion of the Torah that captures the essence of that particular holiday. And so when you analyze what is being read, when you look through and you listen in shul, we have to figure out, why are we reading that particular piece on that particular holiday? What is the message? Now, as we know, Rosh Hashanah is a 2-day holiday. Rosh Hashanah is a 2-day holiday, and now is not the time. Why should it be 2 days? But it happens to be that it is 2 days already from the times of the Gemara. And the Gemara tells us what we're supposed to read on each day of Rosh Hashanah. So one of the days of Rosh Hashanah, the second day of Rosh Hashanah, the reading is the binding of Yitzchak, Akedas Yitzchak, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu instructed Avram Avinu, to take Yitzchak up to Har Moriah and offer him as an offering there. And the connection as to why we read that on Rosh Hashanah, there's a very strong connection. We know that we invoke the merits of Avram and Yitzchak from the Akedah, the fact that Avram was willing to listen. That's throughout the liturgy. If you open up the liturgy on Rosh Hashanah, you'll see much of the liturgy refers to the idea of that binding of Avram and Yitzchak, which took place on Rosh Hashanah, and even more, there's allusions to the shofar, the ram that was offered instead. In the ram of the shofar, whatever that means, is the ram, the shofar is blown from that ram. It means there's very strong Rosh Hashanah connections between what happens on in the binding of Yitzchak and Rosh Hashanah. We understand, therefore, one of the days, that's the reading that we do. The first day's reading, which is the primary day, the first day of Rosh Hashanah, it's interesting. There we read, it's chapter 21, I believe, in Bereshis, Chaf Aleph. It's the story, it starts with the story of Sarah, who is not able to have children, and then is remembered. Hashem Pakad as Sarah, she's remembered. She is able to conceive and have Yitzchak. Now that's about 4 or 5 verses. And there is a connection there to Rosh Hashanah, because the Talmud says that Hashem remembered her on Rosh Hashanah. But it's interesting because it mentions another few people who remember Rosh Hashanah. Yosef got out of jail on Rosh Hashanah, right? We don't mention anything on, we don't read that he got out of jail on Rosh Hashanah, but there is the concept of Shri being remembered, which is the first 5 psukim. And had that been the entire reading for the first day of Rosh Hashanah, we could say that's the reason it's read. Because of Sarah being remembered, Sarah conceiving, having Yitzchak, and that's a strong connection to Rosh Hashanah, happened on Rosh Hashanah. However, the majority, the thrust of that reading really is not focusing not on Sarah, not on Yitzchak, but it focuses on Yishmael. Yishmael is the other son of Avram, who was the son of the other son of Hagar. Hagar was actually a daughter of Paro. When Avram went down to Egypt, and Paro took Sarah, so as an appeasement, he gave him his daughter in marriage, actually as a maidservant, and at the end, Sarah agreed that Avram should be able to marry her or have children with her because she was not able to conceive. So there's the whole story there about, it starts of saying that Sarah sees the son of Hagar, Mitzachek. Mitzachek means like mocking, means bothering Yitzchak, and Rashi says it was more than just mocking or bothering. He was engaged, he was shooting arrows at him. He was there's another interpretation Rashi brings down that he was doing idol worship, this Yishmael. The third interpretation, he was involved in Gilui Arayos. Gilui Arayos was in inappropriate sexual misconduct. There was things that he was doing which were not appropriate. And Sarah goes over to Avram and says, listen, there's not enough space in this household for me and this Hagar and her child. You got to get rid of them. The influence they're having on our child Yitzchak is not appropriate. We have to get them out of the house. And Avram is upset about that. He's perturbed about that because he says, listen, this is my child. I mean, and he goes to Hashem, and Hashem says that, she is greater than you in prophecy, and anything Sarah tells you, Shema b'kolah, you have to listen to what she says. And Avram loads Hagar up on a donkey, gives her a flask of water, sends them presumably back to go back to Egypt, go back to her homeland. She gets lost in the desert. Her son gets a fever, the water gets depleted, and Yishmael is dehydrated, and he's dying. Actually, it's very descriptive. It says that she puts her child down under one of the bushes, and she turns her back and goes a distance away so she should not see her child die. I heard from my own Rosh Hashiva, you see that that's not a Jewish mother. No Jewish mother turns her back on her kid when the kid is dying. But anyway, that's then it brings down that God creates a miracle and a well appears. She's able to save her child. Okay? That pretty much is the thrust of most of the reading of the first day of Rosh Hashanah. And the question that begs itself to be asked is that why are we reading about Yishmael on one of the most important days in the Jewish calendar? The patriarch of the Arabs. What meaning does that have for us? What is the purpose? What are we trying to get from that story that has a direct connection to what we're trying to do here in Shul on Rosh Hashanah? Yeah. Obviously, that's the main reading. So to say the first few verses about Sarah getting remembered, that's the first few seconds. The main thrust of close to 30 psukim is the story of Yishmael. Why are we reading that? So, in order to answer this question, we have to start with another couple of questions. In last week's parsha, there is one of the more enigmatic chapters in the Torah, and that's known as the Ben Sorer Umoreh. The Ben Sorer Umoreh is the wayward and rebellious child. The verse says that parents are having difficulty with their child, and Izolel v'sovei, he steals from them, he buys alcohol, he buys meat, he steals money he has a certain addictive type of personality. He refuses to listen to them. They take him to the Beis Din. The Beis Din actually punish him. He still doesn't listen. And the chapter concludes that if he still doesn't listen to the Beis Din after being warned, then he's taken again back to the Beis Din and he is executed. Very, very powerful. Executing this child who is 13 years old is executed. So the Talmud asks this question, that what has the kid done? Okay, he's not listening to his parents, not a capital offense. We might tell our kids, I'm going to kill you, but not a capital offense. Stealing from the parents, not a capital offense. Not listening to the Beis Din after being warned, not a capital offense. What justifies executing this child? So the Talmud says that Nidon al Shem Sofo, that he is being punished by the Beis Din it's a preemptive strike. That because what's going to happen with this child, he's exhibited tendencies that shows he's not going to stop there. When he depletes the money of his parents, So then what's going to happen?
He's going to steal.
He's going to steal from other people. And what's going to happen inevitably, people don't give away their money easily, he's going to end up killing someone, which is a capital offense. And therefore, let's execute him now, that at least he should die without his soul being tainted by the act of murder. It's like we're doing him a favor. We're killing him now so that it should not get to what could happen later on, which is a very difficult concept to understand, but that's what the Talmud says, why he is executed. The question that is asked 500 years ago by the Mizrahi, Rebbe Mizrahi and the Guraria, the Maharal Prague, they asked a very strong question. If we go back to the story of Yishmael, he's dying under the bush, he's there. And God is about to do a miracle. It says the angels came to God. And they say to God, God, how can you do a miracle for this fellow? Do you know what he and his descendants are going to do to the Jewish people? Do you know what they're going to do, Yishmael and his descendants are going to do to the Jews? How can you save him? And the verse states there that God says that I'm saving him ba'asher hu sham. I'm judging him as he is right now. As he is right now. Right now, he has not perpetrated any of those acts. I judge him on the way he is. It doesn't matter what he's going to be doing. The way he is right now. And therefore God saves him. Obvious question. This contradicts exactly what we just said by the Ben Sarah Amora. By the Ben Sarah Amora, we don't say let's judge him on what he's now. We say preemptive strike. Let's execute him now so that he won't execute or kill someone, that he won't kill anybody later. Let's execute him now. And that we do. So then why by Yishmael did God say, no, ba'asher hu sham, I judge him by he is now and not what's going to happen later on? Very, very strong question. This is the question that's asked 500 years ago. I'll share with you an idea that I heard from my Rosh Hashiva to explain, I think, beautifully, then has a very strong message for us. So right now, we're trying to understand, we have two main questions. We're trying to understand why we read the story of Yishmael on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. It doesn't seem to have anything connected to the essence of Rosh Hashanah. Second thing we're trying to understand is the story of Yishmael itself, that Yishmael himself, it says there, that he is saved, even though in the future there might be heinous acts that are going to be committed by him and his descendants, but God says, ba'asher sham, I judge you the way you are right now, not on what happens later on. Whereas by the Ben Sarah Amora, it says that he is executed preemptively in order that he doesn't become a murderer. What happened to ba'asher sham? Why isn't he judged the way he is, not on what he is going to be? That's the question. Let's ask a couple more questions. The Talmud actually says that there never was a case of a Ben Sarah Amora. And not only that, the Talmud says something very strong. Not only was there no case of Ben Sarah Amora, there will never be one. Now, I understand it's a historical fact. You can make a statement there never was a Ben Sarah Amora. How can you make the statement with confidence that there never will be one? Right? So that needs to be understood. More than that, if there never was a case and never will be one, why do we need to have it in the Torah? Just, waste 20 psukim. What are we writing something that never was and never will be? What's the purpose of having that in the Torah if there never was and never will be one? So when it says, when you study it, you get reward. You know what? Put Snow White in there, let's study and get reward. I mean, what's the purpose of having something that never was? I mean, putting a fantasy, putting something that's not real. I mean, why study and you'll get reward? And so there's a much deeper meaning to what that means, study and get reward. The details of the Ben Sarah Amora are also fascinating in terms of what the requirements, assuming there could be a Ben Sarah Amora, the Talmud goes, what has to happen for there to be a Ben Sarah Amora? So it says that he's not listening to the kol. He doesn't listen to the voice of his father and mother in the singular. So Talmud says the mother and father have to have the same sounding voice. If they don't have the same voice, then it cannot be a Ben Sarah Amora. I spoke about this in back to school night. When the mother has a soprano voice and the father has a baritone, what does it mean? That can't be a ben Sorah? What do you mean they have to have the same sounding voice? Similarly, the Talmud goes through other things. It says that they take the son, they grab him, and they walk him to the Beis Din. It says they have to have all their limbs intact. They have to be able to grab him, they have to be able to walk him. But if they are, Rahman al-Islam, if they have missing limbs, can't be a ben Sorah or Mora. What does their physical well-being have to do with they can be a ben Sorah or Mora? It says that they have to be able to hear, doesn't listen to our voice, they have to be able to communicate, they have to be able to see. Any of these things are impaired, cannot be a ben Sorah or Mora. They have to go to the Beis Din in the city. There has to be a Beis Din in the city. If there's no Beis Din in the city, can't be a ben Sorah or Mora. Well, why not? What if they're based in the next door city? Why does it have to be that there's a Beis Din in that city in order to create a din of ben Sorah or Mora? So these are all details which are very interesting. I mean, they don't seem to be logical as to why these things are all required. So let's go. The second group of questions we're asking is, how do the Chazal know that there never was a case and never will be? Right? I'm sure at some point in time we will feel we have a ben Sorah or Mora on our hands. So how do we know that there will never be a ben Sorah or Mora? What's the guarantee that there'll never be one? Second of all, these details of that, parents have to have the same voice, can't be any physical impediments to the parents, there has to be a Beis Din in the town. Why are all those things requirements for there to be a ben Sorah or Mora, which in the end can't be anyway? So I think there is a really very, very important message that is being said here, and it has to be said correctly because I don't want to be misunderstood. What the Talmud is telling us like this is that the Torah is creating the case of a ben Sorah or Mora. In order for a child to be a ben Sorah or Mora, we have to have evaluated that the nature of his behavior is a true reflection of who he is in essence. Who he is. You have such a corrupt individual that there's no redeeming such a person. He is going to end up murdering somebody because he has shown, he's exhibited behavior that he's so corrupt that this person needs a preemptive strike. Do you know what the Talmud is telling us? To find a child that is so corrupt that you would have to execute him because he is going to become a murderer, you'll never ever find such a situation. There never will be a situation where a child will be so corrupt that he cannot be redeemed. That's why there'll never be a ben Sorah or Mora. Corrupt is rakuv. There cannot be. It cannot be. Why can it not be? Because as long as there are mitigating factors to why he's behaving in the way he's behaving, then he's redeemable. What are these mitigating factors? There's environmental factors that can impact on why he is acting in the way he is acting. Now, this is where we have to be very careful. Everybody has free choice. Meaning you cannot, there's an industry out there today that people making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, you lie down on a couch and say, this is not your fault, it's because your father did this, and this is not your fault because your mother did this. And we're not saying that. We're not saying is that you exonerating yourself from responsibility. We're saying is there is such a thing as being influenced and there being proclivities to acting in a certain way based on the environment around you. At the end of the day, you're responsible. You did the wrong thing. But as long as it's not reflection of who you are in essence, but it's been affected by the environment around you, you know what the difference is? You can change. Because it's not a reflection of who you really are. It's really a reflection of forces that are causing you to behave in a certain way. To find a child that cannot change, to find a situation where somebody is completely irredeemable, is really lo haya v'lo nivra. There never was such a case, and there will never be. Because there always will be mitigating factors to why the behavior is being prompted. Again, responsible for that behavior, but can be changed. And that's what the Torah is giving us. The Torah is giving us the utopian society. The utopian society that if you've raised a kid in this environment, then the kid can be a ben Sorah or Mora. So we have to strive to create that utopian society. The only thing is, it'll never be. Because there are always going to be some factors that are not in play. There's always going to be something that will have negative influences that can create the proclivity, can create a influence on the child to behave in such a way, which is why there will never be such a thing. But we study it because by studying it, the parameters of what we're studying, we have the understanding of what we're studying will help us work on the kind of home that we need to create and the kind of environment that we have to make. Now let's go back and look at the details. The most significant one is that the parents do not have the same voice. What that means, it doesn't necessarily mean that the father speaks in a low voice and the father, it means that they're not on the same page. If the parents are not on the same page and the child is getting mixed messages at home, that's going to be a contributing factor to why a child will act out. I've been doing this for close to 30 years. I'm involved in chinuch. The most telling factor in terms of behavior in children, again, it doesn't allow, choices need to be made and people have to be responsible for their choices. But when there's a lack of shalom bias in a home, when there's a lack of shalom bias, there's no harmony in a home, it almost always will have a negative impact on the children in terms of the way they behave outside of the home. Parents have to be have same voice. That's what it means. They have to have the same voice. The message has to be the same message. Not the same message creates conflict, mixed messages that can have, not always, sometimes you see children are able to rise above it. And again, because we have Bechira, God gave us free choice. It's just we are influenced. So it's a mitigating factor, but it's not an excuse. We don't use it as an excuse. It means we temper the way we react to certain things when we know that it's because certain things. Parents use it as an excuse too. Well, my kid's acting that way because he's sitting next to that kid in class. So why is he sitting like that? That allows him to behave that way? Good. So he has a greater challenge in controlling himself, but that's not an excuse not to control himself because he's sitting next to that kid in class. Right? We use it ourselves as excuses, can be excuses. Mitigating factor. Can be changed. Let's get him away from that kid. Let's see how he behaves. Unfortunately, and this is a reality, is in order for a child to fully respect the message of the parent, he has to have full respect for the parent. It happens to be if, Rahman al-Islam, a parent is an invalid, a parent cannot see, cannot hear. There are things that affects the discipline in the home. So if there is something that is even a physical impediment by a parent that somehow can impact on the way the child sees the parents as a disciplinarian, as the source of the direction they should have, that is a mitigating factor. That's why the Talmud says, missing limbs, no vision, no hearing, it impacts on the child. Again, that can't be a ben Sarah Mora because we have a mitigating factor for the behavior. A Beis Din in the city, if you do not have strong rabbinical leadership in the community, that impacts on the way we educate our children. You have to have strong rabbinical leadership. If you do not have it, you do not have the strong Beis Din, the strong school, the strong ram, it will impact on the child. Can't blame the child 100%. Okay, he's going to be responsible, but not in effect. You can't make him a ben Sarah Mora because there are mitigating factors. So all of these are excuses in terms of not him taking responsibility, but we cannot say that he's shown such a level of corruptness that this is essentially who he is, therefore we can go ahead and execute him. Comes out, there's really no contradiction between the story of Ben Sora Mora and the story of Yishmael. Why is that? Because we're saying the Ben Sora Mora is the utopian. You can be a Ben Sora Mora and he can be executed based on what's going to happen in the future, only if what? If there are no mitigating factors to why the person's behaving they were. Look at the home Yishmael grows up in. Yishmael is growing up in a house of conflict. His mother and Sarah are fighting. There's incessant fighting going on in the home. Conflict in the home. That allows us to say there's a mitigating factor. Therefore, when Hashem says to the Malachim, I deal with him the way he is now, what is going in the future? No. As long as what he is now is not what he's doing in the future, there is a hope that he could be redeemed. He can change. What he's done is there's mitigating factors to the way he has been. He still deserves a reprieve. He still deserves to be saved. Because there are mitigating factors to his behavior. So it's not at all a contradiction to the story of Ben Saramora. Ben Saramora is when there are no mitigating factors, which says it's impossible. Yishmael, there are mitigating factors, and therefore he can be saved. That is the reason why Yishmael. I think, therefore, we answered all the questions pretty much. I think we've dealt with... let's deal with why it's... The only question we have to circle back is why this is the reading on Rosh Hashanah. We get up in Shul on Rosh Hashanah. We've all done terrible things in the past year. We've done things that we shouldn't have done, or things that we know that we shouldn't have done. We're standing before Hashem. We're telling Hashem, that's not who I am. That's not who I am. There have been mitigating factors. Finances have impacted. Shalom Bayis has impacted. There are so many different reasons of why things have impacted. I'm taking responsibility. I'm doing the al-chetz. I'm going to take responsibility for what I've done. But it's not a reflection of who I am. That's not who I am. I can go back to being who I am. That's what tshuva is. Tshuva is going back to who I really am, as opposed to what I've done, which is not a reflection of who I am. And what better than the story of Yishmael to show us that Yishmael is not punished because who he is right now deserves to be saved, because what he has done is not a reflection of who he is. That's what we want. That's what we're asking Hashem to do the same thing for us. Give me another year. Let me prove myself. The unbelievable chesed from Hashem is you have a deal. Listen, 3 years in a row, I've seen you haven't done it. Hashem says, as long as you make the commitment, you get another year. Make the commitment that I am going to have a better year, you get another year. Because that's not who I am. I know what I am, I know what I can be, that's not who I am. That's the story of Yishmael. That's why we read it on Rosh Hashanah. That is the message of Yishmael. Yeah, he's an Arab patriarch, but God, even he, God is willing to save. Because Ba'asher Hu Sham, God will deal with you who you are, where you are, and he will take into account the mitigating factors of what you've done in the past to allow you to have that reprieve. That's a powerful, powerful message, and that's the message. And very often the Yetzer Hara works with us in the opposite. The Yetzer Hara says, what are you even going to bother? Look what you've done all year. What are you going to bother? It's like, it's how people fall into depression. I can't be redeemed. I can't be saved. I don't deserve it. Yes, you do deserve it. It's not who you are. There are mitigating factors of why you've done that. Recognize it. Separate yourself from your actions. Focus on who you really are, and then you can move forward. You have to do tshuva. We have to take responsibility. We can't not take responsibility for our actions. But what we're saying is, but because there are those mitigating factors, we deserve another shot. And that's what we're asking from Hashem on Rosh Hashanah. Everyone have a great day.